All right, Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to the Great Reality Book Study. Uh, good, great weather here in California. I don't know about everybody else, but we got 70 and clear skies, so it's pretty awesome. So we talk a whole lot about Bill Wilson tonight, and it's interesting because as a child, you think of your hero as a person that overcomes it saves the damsel in distress, and like I never thought my hero would be a drunk, you know, but today I realize I define a hero as a person who overcomes their defeats and their obstacles and discovers a better person. And y- you know, and in turn, selflessly spends the rest of their lives helping other people. And that person might even start a revolution. And like I said, my one of perhaps my personal hero is Bill Wilson, and if ask me why Bill is my hero, it's very simple. He wrote this book, and the contents within this book saved my life. Um, it gave me something I truly never had, and that was the ability to help other people. Uh-oh, someone's unmuted in here. You got him? Good. Okay. That's it, the ability to help other people. But it gave me something. That's what gave me, not just because we're both alcoholics, but because I did this process, you know, and I look back at, wow, he had his spiritual experiences. Maybe there's other people out there that it could help, and I don't even think he knew, but Bill had a no, you know, failure attitude, especially when we started putting this book together. But he's a fascinating individual, and I believe I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for him. And I'm going to read it's a little bit of a lengthy paragraph, but it's in 1999, Time Life magazine had a special edition that the 100 greatest icons of the 20th century, and this is what they said about that man. Um, it says his personal popularity was enormous. People would line up for hours to touch his sleeve. Many treated him like a messiah or a rock star. He could not walk down the street without being accosted. People strained to listen to anything he might say, even in casual conversation. Most often, people wanted to meet him and thank him for what he had done. He never felt worthy of praise, only to have a low opinion of himself. Never held himself up as a model. He was the central. He was a central role in the development of the radical movement, a program for spiritual growth, a revolution that saved the lives of millions that for thousands of years could never be saved. Aldous Huxley called him the greatest social architect of our century. The man I'm speaking of is Bill Wilson, a man whose alcoholism has destroyed his health, his career, his family, and the lives of others. And then while incarcerated for the fourth time at New York at Manhattan's Towns Hospital in 1934, Wilson had a spiritual experience which changed his life, leading to the foundation of the revolutionary 12-step program, Alcoholics Anonymous, the successful remedy for alcoholism, a movement which would change his life and the lives of millions. He believed the key to sobriety was a change of heart. The 12 steps included a mission of powerlessness, surrender, a personal God, moral inventory, restitution for harms, and a call to service. Bell insisted again and again he was just an ordinary man, refusing to take money for uh, counseling and membership, despite outside organizations wanting to commend him for his social work. He always rejected a claim to fame. He turned down many honors, including a degree from Yale and Harvard. He declined this magazine's offer to put him on the cover, even with his back turned. His face had never been shown to the general public until the obituary appeared in the newspaper on January 25th, 1971, the day of his death. All the way to the end, he clung to the principles he followed. Bill is Bill Wilson is an icon and a hero. I guess I hope many others are grateful for what he created. There's a little bit more to it, but I mean, and it finishes up and it says today Alcoholics Anonymous has over 2 million active members worldwide, 100,000 registered groups, and a little bit more on there. But it's I found it fascinating reading what that guy wrote. Obviously, the writer, because I forget, it was like Arnold G or something. So most likely a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm gonna put up the first step up here. We did that. We looked at that last week, and we'll look at it again. And it says, we admitted we're powerless over alcohol. And there's the M dash that our lives become unmanageable. And the last 2 weeks we got into step one when we covered the oxygen. We learned about this body is abnormal as the mind, and that we have an allergy of the body, and the allergy of the body, that when I put alcohol in my system or whatever else, I wind up losing all control. And the obsession is a reoccurring, persistent idea of drinking, and doesn't respond to reason and lacks choice. We can't stop when we start, and when we're stopped, we can't stop from starting, is a good way to put it. Um, unless we do something about it. We will die or go permanently insane. We talked about the medical hopelessness of alcoholism, that we are powerless over alcohol because of that allergy obsession. Step one is separated from what's called an M dash, is an old school punctuation mark that is used to kind of, instead of a comma, or it's a word to it's to indicate a change in thought, to bring stronger emphasis on what was just said. In Bill's story tonight, we're going to look at that unmanageability, a lot of it, and that is, the unmanageability is very misunderstood, because sure, parts of it, a lot of people would say it's just consequences, DUIs, losing friends, breaking, family breakups, but that can happen to anybody, going to jail, rehab, but then there's the insanity of the first drink, and the insanity, we can't stop drinking. It's a type of unmanageability Bill Wilson mentioned, I think it was 1963, 64, in an interview, mentioned that there's an unmanageability when you're bone dry. And that's that restless, irritable, and discontent. It's a high anxiety, easily pissed off and not satisfied. Complete mindset of that, all wrapped in one bow. And the big book calls this type of unmanageability many things. You can call it spiritual malady, spiritual sickness, insanity. I say it's untreated alcoholism. And if we continue to experience this unmanageability, my mind will seek out using comfort that comes at once by taking a few drinks. And this unmanageability, that unmanageability is only overcome by doing 4 through 9. And the one thing that Silkworth stated is these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit, found they cannot break it. Once having lost their self-confidence, reliance upon things humans, their problems pile up on, and they become astonishingly difficult to solve. Now, if you look at that last sentence on there, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them, and they become astonishingly difficult to solve. That's the unmanageability. And we're going to see tonight how successful Bill Wilson was at managing his life, running his life, controlling his life. So the first time I saw this story, I thought, what do I have in common with a guy that was born in 1895 or died when I was 2 years old? And when I finally read it, I realized that while, we might not, lived in different time periods, and the experiences of alcohol were slightly different, I realized there was nothing different about the way we drank and the condition we had. It all made sense. So when I read this, my grand sponsor had maybe cross out Bill's story. Bill wrote Steve's story in there because that's what it was. It's a check your experience chapter, and you will see it for yourself. And the better understand this experience, when Bill's life starts to spiral downwards, I'm going to refer to them as the doom curve. So doom means it's when something's condemned to death or ruin, right? I'm going to close this down until I forgot I was still open. It means to condemn something to death or ruin. So it's like an adverse, inevitable destruction, I guess he called it, unpleasant destiny. sometimes, and there is death sometimes, but curve is something, it's that, it's a bending line with no straight parts. That's what a curve is. It's a point where where direction changes. So a doom curve is a disastrous change in direction leading to a downward spiral or even death. And there are 30 doom curves I'm going to point out in Bill's story at certain moments. And I said, again, we're here to check our experience. So let's check this out. I mean, when I first started, like I said, when I first started reading this, I'm like, okay, well, what's this book going to be like? Because I mean, I went to page one. I didn't go to the Roman numerals. I didn't know any better. I always skipped the good stuff, beginnings, and it says war fever ran high in the New England towns, and I'm like, what the heck is this? But anyways, war fever ran high in New England town, which new young officers in Plattsburgh were assigned. That's 1918, and we were flattered when the first citizens took us into their homes, making us feel heroic. Here was love, applause, moments sublime with intervals hilarious. I was a part of life at last. And the midst, this is very important, in the midst of that, I discovered alcohol. It doesn't say I had my first drink. He says, I discovered alcohol. Think about what happens when you discover something. So how did Bill feel before he discovered alcohol? Well, it doesn't sound like he felt like he was a part of life. Maybe he felt incomplete. Now, do you remember when you discovered alcohol? Again, not your first drink. Now, when I discovered what alcohol could do for me, I was 17 years old. I had my first drink years before that. I think I drank everything out of a whole bottle of grenadine on my parents' liquor cabinet. That didn't go well. But I was 17 years old and I drank lots of times. I was smoking what weed at that time too, and maybe other stuff that was put my way. But I walked into this big party, lots of pretty girls there, the cool kids, the jocks. I was more the long-haired stoner kid, back in those days, hippie kid. Big surprise, right? And I walked into there and I went, oh, everyone's here. All the people I need to be accepted by. And I started feeling nervous, and one of my friends goes, hey, Wood, drink this. And it was 170 proof White Lightning. And I didn't take a sip. I took a big swig. And here's what happened was pretty interesting. The whole complexion of my universe changed. I could look the world in the eye. My fears fell from me. I had peace of mind. I knew new freedom and new happiness. The self-pity I felt when I walked in disappeared. Fear disappeared. I didn't regret the past. My outlook upon life changed. I discovered that alcohol could do for me what I couldn't do for myself. Does it sound familiar? That's what I felt when I had that. It was like, I mean, I would feel like I was John Wayne and Clint Eastwood wrapped into one all of a sudden. And, I'm going to tear this place apart. Let's go back to the book. I forgot the strong warnings and the prejudice of my people concerning drink. In time, we sailed over there. I was very lonely and turned to alcohol. We landed in England. I visited Winchester Cathedral. So he got to England, World War One. He was so scared and nervous. That's where he went into the cathedral, right? And he prayed, and he had an experience. And remember this, because we will discuss this later in the chapter. We'll refer to it again. But it says, much moved, I wandered outside. My attention was caught by a doggerel on an old tombstone. He says, here lies a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. A good soldier never forgot whether he death by musket or by pot. Well, I'm going to show you the picture of the actual one. And it's a little bit different what it says on it. It says, here sleeps in peace a Hampshire grenadier who caught his death drinking cold small beer. Soldiers be wise for his untimely fall, and when he's not hot, drink strong or none at all. And our soldiers never forgot whether he died by musket or by pot. That's the actual picture of the thing of England. Pretty interesting. And I like what it says next on here because it's pretty powerful. Ominous warning we fail to heed. Something's ominous, it's unpleasant and threatful. And but ominous warning, which I failed to. I remember those. You remember those ominous warnings you maybe had? Maybe it was by the doctor or the cops or dad or someone. And I remember I was about 19 years old, thinking I was cool out of high school, and I go to these guys' house to buy some dope. And these guys were skinny and tatted out and done prison time and stuff like that. You felt kind of nervous going in there, but you know, and I was buying it, from this guy, and he reached out and grabbed me by the arm really hard. And he looked at me right in the eyes and he says, "Man, I hope you know what you're doing here, kid, because this stuff will spit you up, chew you up and spit you out. It will rip your head off." And I was like, "Oh no, man, I'm cool. I got this." And I left there and I was like, "Man, I ain't gonna be like those guys." That's the ominous warning I failed to heed. Not only the vision of what they said, but when you're in denial, you're denial. I wasn't there yet. This 22 and a veteran of foreign wars, I went home at last. I was fancying myself a leader. What was your, at 22? Think about that. For had not men of my battery given me a special appreciation, my talent for leadership, I imagine would place me at the head of vast enterprises, which I would manage with utmost assurance. What was, I mean, think about it. What was your dream at 22 years old? I mean, mine was, hey, I'm going to follow the Grateful Dead all around the country and sell some drugs, and I'll make enough money to move to Hawaii. Not a bad idea, but I guess I was saying I was to be like a successful dope dealer. That doesn't happen. It doesn't work out, especially if you're alcoholic. Um, it says I took a night law course and obtained employment at investment surety company. The drive for success was on. I proved the world I was important. My work took me all about Wall Street. Little by little, I became interested in the market. So he's going, he's taking a law course, but he's got his eye on the market. He's walking by that and seeing it. Many people lost money, but some became very rich. Why not I? I studied economics and business as well as law. So he's a pretty smart dude. Potential alcoholic that I was, I nearly failed my law course. At one of the finals, I was too drunk to think or write. Now think about this. In a little bit, we're going to learn that he passed the law course, but he was so drunk he couldn't. He couldn't. He says he almost failed. Because he was. I nearly failed the law course, but he was still drunk. He passed the class. Though my drinking was not yet continuous, it disturbed my wife. So there's a little bit of warnings coming in there. We had long talks when I'd still her forbiddings, like, "Hey, come on, chill out, honey," by telling her that men of genius conceived their best projects when drunk. Of course they did. That the most majestic constructions of philosophical thought are so derived. Smooth talker, right? Aren't we all? By the time I completed the course, I knew law was not for me. I don't know if he passed the bar. I know, but I mean, he passed the law course. But you know, it's not easy to do that. And he did it when drunk a lot. And it says the investing maelstrom of Wall Street had me in script. Business and financial leaders were my heroes. I mean, again, it shows how smart he was here, that he's doing law school as a hobby, but he really wants to, he wants to go where the money is, fast money, a typical one of us, right? Out of this alloy commenced to forge the weapon that would one day turn in its flight like a boomerang and all but cut me to risen. So there's an old story. So Bill was 10 years old, and he felt really depressed because he was this tall, nerdy, kind of strange looking kid. And he was the tallest kid in his class. And his father, he had his father abandoned the family. His mother had left him to care for her grandparents. And one day, I mean, had left him in the care of his grandparents. And one day, his grandfather, who was a straightforward dude, showed him a book about Australia and told him that only the Aboriginal people could make, and throw a boomerang, you know. And this is what Bill wrote. Here was my chance, I thought. I was still the first man in America to make and throw a boomerang. Set on fire by this goal, he made a boomerang and spent 6 months learning how to throw it. but mine was a power drive that kept on for 6 months till I made the boomerang that swung around the churchyard in front of the house and almost hit my grandfather in the head when it came back. Emotionally, I began the fascinating fascinating of another sort of boomerang, one that would almost kill me later on. So that story shows Bill's determination to get things done at a young age. And from what I read, there wasn't many kids at all that even knew what a boomerang was. And so maybe it was one of the first kids. It was unheard of at the time. Living, plus they're expensive. And it wasn't, this is a time where a lot of people had money. So living modestly, my wife and I saved $1,000. It it went into a certain securities, then cheap and rather unpopular. I rightly imagined that they would someday have a great rise. I failed to persuade my broker friends to send me out looking for factories and management, but my wife and I decided to go anyways. I developed a theory. So this is interesting, something that Bill Wilson came up with that they still do today. I developed this is called fundamental analysis. I developed a theory that most people lost money in the stocks through ignorance of the markets. I discovered, many reasons later on. So fundamental analysis was when he would go he would go to another, somewhere out of the way and look at the companies and rate them and send them back to the other stock persons, people. Bill was one of the first people that really did that. And some people said it was even his idea. And it's still done to this day. Pretty powerful. I had a friend of mine that was a, you know, book thumper and a stockbroker. So he would explain a lot of stuff to me very well. Um, Says we gave our positions off reward in the motorcycle sidecar stuff with blankets and clothes and three uh I'm sorry, tents, blankets, and change of clothes and three huge volumes of financial and reference services. So I'm gonna open up the chat here. I mean the share the screen. So that's the Bill on the Harley, and that's called the Model J. With the factory sidecar. So it's a 61 cubic inch twin with I think it's 3-speed shift transmission. It was one of the first Harleys to feature the full electric package in it, the headlight, tail light, horn, and all that. So it was retail for about $400 and was the most expensive bike on the line. The sidecar alone cost $150. And there's another picture. So kind of cool stuff, you know. So Bill rode. There's a shirt. I used to have Bill rode a Harley. I used to have a Harley. So yeah, I had a shirt that said Bill rode a Harley. And then all right, our friends thought a lunacy commission should be appointed. Perhaps they were right. I had some success at speculation, so we had a little money. But once we worked on a farm for months to avoid drawing on small capital, that was the last honest manual labor on my part for many a day. We covered the whole United States in a year. That's pretty good. At the end of it, my reports to Wall Street um, procured me to a position in in the use of large expense account. The exercise of an option. Brought in more money, leaving us with a profit of several $1,000s that year. Um, yeah. For the next few years, fortune flew my way and applause. I mean, through money and applause my way. I had arrived. My judgment and ideas were followed by many of the tunes of paper millions. The great boom of the late 20s was seething and swelling. There's a lot of money being made at this time. A lot of money being thrown down. It's kind of getting out of control. Drink was taking an important and exhilarating part of my life. So you see that starting to go that way. There was a loud talk at the jazz places uptown. So during Prohibition, those places were like there's speakeasies and stuff like that. And some were straight up jazz places, but there's drugs, there's alcohol, there's gambling, prostitution. You get wherever you want there. Um There was I think it was 130 some, or it was 3,000 of them in New York City alone or something like that. Everyone spent in thousands and shouted in millions. Scoffers could scoff and be damned. I I made a host of Fairweather Friends. So here we go. We got doom curve number one. So here's doom curve number one. My drinking assumed more serious portions continuing all day, almost every night. Remember when that happened to you? Followed up by doom code number two. The ramifications of my friends terminated in a row and I became a lone wolf. Remember, you started pushing people away because they didn't like what you're doing or you just didn't remember what you did. There were many unhappy scenes in the old scrumptious apartment. There have been no infidelity, for loyal to my wife, helped in times by extreme drunkenness, kept me out of scrapes. In 1929, I contracted golf fever. We went out we went at once to the country. My wife and I applauded. I started to take on Walter Hagen. Remember the movie Bagger Vance? There's the main guy they went against was out Walter Hagen, big golfer at the time. Liquor caught up with me much faster, and I came up behind Walter. So here's this what he's got a dream again, and and he's gonna make be successful in this thing. But what I'm talking about, what kind of dream did you want to accomplish, and at that time in your life? And I think what we're talking about is as an ideal. Like, well, we all have this ideal, and it's more than a dream. It's in our heart. So it's like an ideal is a principle and value that's embedded within us, and we actively pursue leads to growth. Maybe it's something you've always wanted to do, the perfect job, or like being a doctor or whatever. You know, what caught something caught you before you got to your ideal. What took you out of it? What happened? Do you still have that ideal? You know, are you you know stuck doing something you don't want to do? The problem, the problem with life is we start settling for things and reaching our goals and we experience, you know, and experience rather than experiencing our dreams. And our ideals can be more than just thoughts; they can be reality. Thanks to these steps, and pursue them leads to reality. When we get further in the book, especially in how it works, we'll get to talking about ideals in great detail. So we have doom curve number three. You remember this one? I began to be jittery in the morning. And you say, oh, it must be something I ate, right? Something like that. Be jittery in the morning. Golf permitted drinking every day and every night. It was fun to cardome around the exclusive course which had inspired me as a lad. I acquired the impeccable code of a tan one sees upon the well-to-do. The local banker watched me whirl fat checks in and out of his till with amusement, skepticism. Um, I don't remember the golf course it was called, but I believe it was Lincoln's brother or something like that was on the board there. But Bill was never a member of the golf course. He made a lot of people money there, and they would say, "Hey, come on and golf here." And so he started realizing that the more stock he could sell and hook these people with money. They were playing golf and making money, and he did it. But look at this. Abruptly, in October 1929, all hell broke loose in the New York Stock Exchange. After one of those days of inferno, I wobbled from the hotel bar to a brokerage office. It was 8 o'clock, 5 hours after the market had closed. The ticker had clattered, and I started an inch tape which bore the inscription XYZ32 had been 52 that morning. What it means, the stock had dropped $20 a share. So a block, Bill was doing leveraging. So he would sell in blocks. A block of stocks had 1,000 shares. So if you had a block and you lost, amount of money, you losing $20,000, had, I think his options were Bennington Corn Company and Pinnock, Ford Foods or something like that. Had he controlled interest in Bennington Corn Company, so because he had so much stock, but he had multiple blocks, And the way you would do it with leveraging would be like, let's say Howard, I go to Howard and I say, hey, give me, you know, give me 300 bucks and I'll give you the stock and you just pay in on it. So it was a big deal when this thing crashed. So he had multiple blocks he owned and money, the margin leverage, mean, so he had friends and family like his parents and stuff like that were, you know, paying into the stock. Because I was finished and so were my friends. Um, says the papers reported men jumping from death with high tower finance. There's pictures of that actually. That disgusted me. I would not jump. I went back to the bar. Of course he did. My friends, that's his investors he's talking about, had dropped several million since 10 o'clock. So what? Tomorrow was another day. I think that's etched on the alcoholic's tombstone. Tomorrow's another day. You know, this is as I drank. Look at this. Remember this? The old fierce determination came back. So here's this guy that's lost more money than most people that are jumping out of the buildings. So did his friends. Instead of killing himself like others did, he drank. He could not figure out how his friends, how to get his friends' money back. And so many people were this stock hit him hard. Silkworth was hit hard by the stock because he had saved up all this money to start. His dream was going to be a little like kind of like a 10-person hospital type thing for where he could work on alcoholics, and he lost all that money he invested. He had no money, so that's why he had to kind of go to towns, because towns did not look at alcohol in the same way Bill did. I mean, Silkworth did, but Silkworth lost all his money, so he had to go to towns and make half the amount of money he was making. A lot of people lost money. The next morning, I telephoned a friend in Montreal. He had plenty of money and thought I better go to Canada. All right. By the following spring, we were living in a custom style. I felt like Napoleon returning from Alba. No Saint Hilaire from me when drinking cut it to me again, and my generous friends had to let me go. This time I stayed broke. And I think it was the one where it was Bill was sitting with these guys and he's sober. There's nothing about allergies obsession yet or anything. And he's not doesn't want to drink because he's doing good in this deal. And they passed Applejack around the room. And Bill thought he went to him, he smelled it. And his obsessions eventually said to him, "Never tried Applejack before." And he drank it and woke up with a letter next to his bed. Get out. His suitcase was packed and he was gone. He says, we went to live with my wife's parents. Remember those days? I found a job, then lost it. It was all involved with the tax again. Now here's doom curve number 4. Mercifully, no one could guess I would have no real employment for 5 years or hardly draw a sober breath. Many of us can never draw, real employment, or we're unemployable and hardly draw a sober breath. You remember, that when that happened? My wife began to work at a department store, coming home exhausted to find me drunk. Remember those days, they still didn't have the Free Labor Act, so who knows how many hours she was working. People working 70 hours a week because this Free Labor Act made it 40 hours a week, and then it kicked into 41. I became an unwelcome hanger-on at brokerage places. Just doom curve number 5. This is a big one. Liquor ceased to be a luxury, became a necessity. I mean, that was a big one for me because I remember buying the other stuff, than alcohol, and I would do it. I'm good because I just do it on weekends, and then all of a sudden, I go to the guy's house every Saturday night, and he go, "Hey, man," and he'd sell it to me, and the next thing I know, I'm going there on Monday and Tuesday. It went from a luxury to necessity. Alcohol already done that, but you remember when that happened to you? Bathtub gin, 2 bottles a day, often 3. It got to be routine. Sometimes a small deal would net $1,000. And I pay my bills at bars and delicatessens. That's basically the speakeasy. The delicatessens in New York City in those days, you would walk in to the delicatessen, you would show a card to the owner, and he would just go like this, and you would walk up, and he would open up a walk-in, and you'd walk into the walk-in, and there'd be a door at the other end of the walk, and you walk down, and be a long hallway to go down blocks until you got into that speakeasy room with all the alcohol, drugs, and prostitutes and gambling, you know. And here's doom curve number 6. This one endlessly, and it began to awaken very early in the morning, shaking violently. So no longer shaking, violent shakes. Remember those days when, I don't know about you, I would be in the grocery store to sign, a bad check, whatever it was, but I couldn't even do it. My hands would shake. I saw a guy trying to do that the other day, and he was younger. He was only like 35. Doom curve 7. A tumbler full of gin, followed by half a dozen bottles of beer, would be required if I were to eat any breakfast. Required means the disease is coming on him. The allergy, the allergy. So just to not shake, he had to have that for breakfast. A tumbler full of gin. It's a big bottle. And we're talking prohibition time, where this stuff was 120 proof because they're making it themselves. They're not gonna make 80 proof stuff. No one even knew what 80 proof was. And you would, and then so the bottle of that and a 6-pack just so we could eat. Doom curve 8. Nevertheless, I still thought I could control the situation. Of course, there were periods of sobriety which renewed my wife's hope. So there's 4 doom curves in that paragraph that we just read. So there's gradually things got worse. Let's see how worse. The house was taken away by the mortgage holder. My mother-in-law became ill. My wife and father-in-law became ill. My mother-in-law died, and my wife and father-in-law became ill. That's not, that's bad stuff to happen, but that can happen to anybody. But if you're an alcoholic, it's going to make your life worse because your life already worse. It's not all results of drinking. But remember where his mindset is. He's restless, irritable, and discontent. And when you're restless, irritable, discontent, if someone gets ill or passes away, it's the end of the world. You just don't know what to do with it. And you got to make it all about yourself. What makes you handle stuff like that? Steps. So then I got a promising business career. Stocks were at a low point at 32, and I somehow formed a group to buy. I was there journalisting in the profits. Then I went on a prestigious bender, and the chance vanished. Of course it did. Doom curve number 9. I woke up. This had to be stopped. I saw I could not take so much as one drink. I was through forever. Before then, I had written lots of sweet promises, but my wife had happily observed this time I meant business, and so I did. So one thing that's interesting, when he would write these promises to his wife, she would put them in the Bible. Those put them in the Bible. And so his program he's trying here is one we hear all the time: don't take the first drink. Just don't take the first drink, you won't get drunk. That's what he's thinking right here, right? Let's see how well his first drink program worked. Doom curve 10. Shortly after, I came home drunk. There had been no fight. So much for that program. Where had been my high resolve? I simply did not know. Hadn't even come to mind. So this book calls that haven't come to mind stuff, that mental lapse in thought, a strange mental blank spot. So the strange mental blank spots, which we'll read later in the book, and like in More About Alcoholism, when Fred says, I saw willpower can I help with self-knowledge and those strange and self-knowledge helping those strange mental blank spots. It's when we're supposed to, it's what the rehabs always tell us we're supposed to do. We're supposed to raise a defense, and sound reasoning is going to kick in, and common sense will kick in, and self-knowledge, everything I learned will kick in, and it doesn't. Hazy, right? You ever heard the people say, I just wound up at a liquor store, and even remember driving there? Because it's the thought that I shouldn't go there is gone. So basically, it says in this book, everything we think we know about alcohol doesn't even come to mind. Our past problems. We don't say, I'm alcoholics. This won't turn out good. It doesn't come to mind. This might cause me physical suffering. It's not going to come to mind. Nothing comes to mind. Remember the story of Jim? He puts the whiskey into his milk, and he says, I vaguely sense I was not being too smart. That's a strange mental blank spot. That's the way obsession works. That hazily, strange mental blank spot, of course, leads Bill to doom curve 11. Someone had pushed a drink my way, and I had taken it. Was I crazy? Hmm. I began to wonder if such an appalling lack of perspective seemed near being just that. Renewing my resolve, I tried again. Some some time passed, and and confidence began to be replaced by cocksureness. So maybe he's got a little ego going, a little high self-esteem, arrogance, right? Yeah, I could laugh at the gin mills. Now I have what it takes. One day I walked into a cafe to telephone. So his life's really going to unravel, and the doom curves are going to fly. 12. And no time was beating my hand on the bar. I asked myself how it happened again. Doom curve 13. As the whiskey rose to my head, I told myself I would manage better next time, but I might as well get good and drunk, and so I did. Doom curve 14. The remorse and horror and hopelessness of the next morning are unforgettable. The courage to battle was not there. Doom curve 15. My brain raced uncontrollably, and it was a terrible sense of impending calamity. Doom curve 16. I hardly dare cross the street, at least I collapsed and be run down by an early morning truck for scarcely daylight. Of course, Doom curve 17. An all-night play supplied me with a half a dozen, I'm sorry, I'm not saying a half a dozen, a dozen glasses of ale. My withering nerves were still at last. And morning paper told me the market had gone to hell again. So had I. The market would recover, but I wouldn't. But that was a hard thought. Doom curve 18. This is the one that always seems to come in. Should I kill myself? No, not now. The metal fog settled down. Gin would fix that. 2 bottles of gin in oblivion. See what took away his suicide thought? Gin. It fixed it. I had a guy say years ago, the two things that save alcohols the most is alcohol and the steps from killing themselves. I've known over a dozen people commit suicide while sober. No joke. The mind and body are marvelous mechanisms for mind, and endured this agony for 2 more years. That leads to doom curve number 19. Sometimes I stole from my wife's slender purse when the morning terror and madness were on me. Doom curve 20. Again, I swayed dizzy before the open window or the medicine cabinet, whether it was poison or drugs, cursing myself for a week for a weakling. There was a flight from city to country and back as my wife and I sought escape. Doom curve 21. Then came the night when the physical and mental torture was so hellish, I feared I'd burst through my window, sash and all. Somehow I managed to drag my mattress to the floor as I suddenly leaped. Doom curve 22. A doctor came with heavy sedative. Interesting. Next day found me drinking both gin and sedative. Of course he was. This combination soon landed me on the rocks. Doom curve 23. People feared for my sanity. So did I. That's Doom curve 24. I could eat little or nothing. When drinking, I was 40 pounds underweight. When I got sober in 2000, I was 140 pounds, and I'm 6'3". And someone had one of my friends, I bumped one of my friends in the streets about a year into recovery, and he goes, "Oh, I heard you had AIDS." Because they thought they were all writing off different. What's wrong with this guy? What happened? You know, 140 pounds. And Doom curve 25. My brother-in-law is a physician. Through his kindness and of my mother, I placed in a nationally known hospital for the mental and physical rehabilitation of alcoholics. So his brother-in-law is Leonard Strong, who's the husband of Bill's younger sister, Dorothy. Strong, you know, struck, stuck by Bill in the lowest times, and he was one of the first people, other than Bill's wife, to confront him about his drinking. But of course, the National Hospital for Rehabilitation of Alcoholics is Towns Hospital in New York City, which we talked a lot about a few weeks back. And something that's very important. Don't forget, the Towns Hospital was a drying out place for the wealthy. It was a detox of the wealthy. American millionaires, European royalty, oil sheiks, all detox there. The rooms were like suites. I mean, they were gorgeous and personal bathrooms and telephones. They weren't like what like you see. Uh, they had bathrooms, fancy bathrooms at Slippers. And the cost of admission was between 300 and 450 for a 4 to 6 day stay, depending on what they thought. Strong not only arranged for Bill to go there, but he paid for Bill to stay there. There's no way Bill could afford it then. But so Strong was also Leonard Strong was also linked to many things. He was the link with how we got money from Rockefeller. He was, the first trustee on the Alcoholic Foundation, big part of history. Google about Leonard Strong, and you'll find it pretty interesting. Back to the book. Under the so-called belladonna treatment, my brain cleared. Hydrotherapy and mild exercise helped much. The belladonna treatment is basically, which is nasty. It just clean you out. It was a mixture of henbane, dried berries, lots of dried berries, and other plants. Basically, they would say it helped with diarrhea, but it really did the opposite. But it would help with intestinal cramps, and it would turn your face bright red, and it was given every hour all day for 50 hours until your patient's face turned flush and clear. 50 hours every hour on the day. I mean, I don't know. On top of that, they had the physical exercise and hydrotherapy. So this is a huge point right here in egg history, because this is where he would meet William Duncan Silkworth. His best of all, I met a kind doctor who explained that though certainly selfish and foolish, which he knew, I have been seriously ill, bodily and mentally. So Bill finally got his diagnosis. The diagnosis is, what's wrong with you? And this guy's telling him, you have a mind that condemns you to drink against your will, and a body that condemns you to death. You're gonna lose control once you start. And he heard that. But he heard that diagnosis. He heard, and it said, it relieved me somewhat to learn that in alcoholics, the will is amazingly weakened when it comes to combating liquor, though it often remains strong in other respects. It's, yeah. My incredible behavior in the face of desperate desire to stop was explained. Understanding from myself now, I fared forth in high hope. For 4 months, the goose hung high. So he's moving pretty good. I went to town regularly and even made a little money. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. So self-knowledge is the information you draw upon when finding the answer and you remember something, like self-knowledge might be if you using a staple gun and stick it in your hand, you're probably not going to do it again that way, right? But anything you learn. Remember when you go to rehab, they tell you anything about alcohol. Oh, there's no way I'm going to use it again. So remember, you don't take the first drink. So now he's going to try the self-knowledge program. Don't forget your bottom. Doom curve 26. But it was not, for the fateful day came when I drank once more. That didn't work too well. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. He's at Towns again. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. Doom curve 27. My wearing, despairing wife was informed that it would all end with heart failures during delirium tremens, or I would develop wet brain, perhaps even die in a year. She would soon have to give me over the undertaker in the asylum. Just one thing about wet brain, it's permanent brain damage that's caused by alcohol abuse. It's like a pickling of the brain, almost like it causes almost like a dementia. And it's like great confusion, loss of mental ability, loss of muscle control, loss of memory loss, all that, leg tremors, really bad, abnormal eye movement, double vision, death. I heard it comparable to ALS. It cannot be reversed. Many things can be reversed, but wet brain can't. I've seen miracles happen. I heard people have thought they had wet brain, but they came out of it. I do have a friend that has wet brain, and he was able to do the steps, but he's got a lot of brain damage. They did not need to tell me, and I almost welcomed the idea. So he was like, "Oh, huh," kind of welcomed death. It was a devastating blow to my pride. We've all been there. I who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, here's this ego, you know, of my capacity to surmount obstacles was cornered at last. Ooh, kick in the gut. Now I was to plunge into the darkness, into the dark. This is the best place he could be, joining the endless uh, possession of slots who had gone on before me. I thought my poor wife, there had been much happiness after all. What would I not give to make amends? So he's thinking, man, which is a way somehow I can make it up to these people I hurt. He's thinking about, but that was over now. So he's like, heck, I'll never be able to make this. This is the best life's gonna get. He's exactly where he's supposed to be, the bottom of the pit. And this explains it perfectly, the bottom of the pit. No words, this is Doom Curve 28. No words can tell the loneliness and despair I found, the bitter morals of self-pity. Quicksand stretched all around me in all directions. I met my match. I have been overwhelmed. Alcohol is my master. He just admitted defeat. Just admitted defeat. Trembling, I stepped from the hospital, a broken man. Fear sealed me up a bit. So Doom Curve 29. Then came the assiduous insanity of the first drink on his Armistice Day, 1934. I was off again. So he's riding on a trolley in New York, or yeah, trolley, I think it was, or a bus. And it breaks down. And they go, hey, everyone come into this restaurant and you get free food. And Bill's like, all right, I'll bring my, I think he was going fishing actually. Brought his fishing pole in there. And he sits there and he's talking to this guy about stocks. And this guy and the bartender comes by and he goes, hey, anyone want a drink? And he says, no. And the guy goes, you can't drink? And he goes, no, man. And he explained to the guy about the allergy and why he can't drink. Right. And he tells how horrible his life has been, everything about it. And the guy comes back again with whiskey and he goes, shots on the house. And Bill takes one and downs it. And the guy goes, man, he goes, you're crazy. And Bill goes, I am. I said, I just told the guy everything about himself. And this is the final Doom Curve 30. Everyone became resigned to the certainty that I would have to be shut up somewhere or would stumble along to a miserable end. How dark it is before the dawn. Out of brokenness is always the opportunity to live. In reality, that was the beginning of my last Daba. I was soon to be catapulted into what would I like to call the fourth dimension of existence. I was to know happiness, peace, and usefulness. Who doesn't want that? In a way that is incredibly wonderful as time passes. Let's talk about this fourth dimension existence. We live in a three-dimensional world, highs measured by beginning to end, width, side by side, depth, top to bottom. Three-dimensional world is observed through five senses: hearing, taste, touch, smell, sight. But there's a fourth dimension. There's a dimension that exists beyond the third dimension. There's a fourth dimension existence, or sixth sense, called God consciousness. And consciousness is a deep awareness, deep sense of awareness of God. So in other words, God consciousness is a deep awareness of a higher self or God. So we can transcend the physical existence and experience our own divinity within. So consciousness is a pre-existing spiritual presence that's already within us all, that's just waiting to be tapped into. It's the only part of the God consciousness is the only part of us that's capable of exceeding our animal instincts. The animal instinct is what we look at on column 3 and 4-step. And God consciousness is the only thing that's capable of exceeding those. And it's about knowing, growing, and developing from within your own being, discovering life's the great qualities you have, such as love, peace, harmony, and bliss, and receiving strength, inspiration, guidance, and direction. Notice it said we were, catapulted. He also calls that launched later into a dimension. He also calls it rocketed, you know. You know, a rocket travels 18,000 miles an hour. In a blink of an eye, you go from one place to the next. You're different. Rocket another time, another dimension. So you rocket into that dimension requires spiritual action, like the soul surgery, 4 through 9. Meaning reaching God conscious, not achieved by sitting around with a bunch of meetings talking about my last drunk and collecting another chip. I mean, the greatest illusion is that God's out here somewhere. All that illusion creates is doubt, and one who lives in doubt lives in fear, and there's no peace. What if, what if we went beyond belief and sought this God within? And what if by seeking this God within, you experiencing God? And what if we actually had tools right in front of us for us? And what if by experiencing God, you know God? What if knowing God, you're set free? And what happens is that you will live the same life as the Buddha did, and Jesus did, and Krishna did, and the saints did. And they never paint a picture or convinced others. You know what they said? Follow me. And isn't that what Bill Wilson says in his book? To show others precisely how we recovered is the main purpose of this book. Follow me. Follow me. Until you take the action of 4 through 9 to seek the fourth dimension, there is no way to fully comprehend God. You see why it's an awakening. Do you see why it's the fourth dimension? We never dreamed of. Quick preview for next week. Near the end of a bleak November, I sat drinking in my kitchen with a certain satisfaction. I reflected there was enough gin conceal all of the house to get me through the next night and the next day. That's the best we could do at that time. My wife was at work, and I wondered whether I dared hide a bottle in the bed. I would need it before daylight. My musing was interrupted by the telephone. The cheery voice of an old school friend asked if he might come over. That's what we're going to lead off. We'll come back to that next week. Leave it as a cliffhanger. So I'm going to stop the recording for now.